Hey, let's talk about the other side of the Big Ten. I'm Rob Bowron for Sharp College Football, and today we're going to talk about the Big Ten West, a division that I think a lot of folks have a little closer than we do. There's definitely, I think, because of the scheduling, and we're going to get into that. There's some likelihood of a little bit of a pileup, I think, with some teams roughly finishing with about the same number of wins. That said, we really like the Badgers coming into this year. We really project them with everything that they return on the defensive side of the ball. And if they really can, I mean, we'll see, right? I mean, like if they really need, and it's one of our big questions, right? I mean, do they need great QB play? But, if they're able to keep the offense going in the range that they have been, and they really have been prolific on offense under Paul Chryst, as well as then, get the defense going, then, the Badgers should be head and shoulders above everyone else in the Big Ten West. But there are some really interesting sort of goings on in what appears to be a very mushy middle, underneath Wisconsin, and then down, and then Illinois sort of trailing the pack there. So I'm excited. We're getting into this a little late. It was a little bit of a busy day here today. So we're going to try to get through it pretty quick. If you're watching on Periscope, of course, OBS we just lost the internet connection for a second because, of course, that always happens. But anyway, let's do it. So first, let's do the Badgers here. Wisconsin, we project them right now coming in at number 4 overall. A lot of this is built off what they have coming back on both sides of the ball. They're at 62% of their returning production on offense. They're at 81% of their returning production on the defensive side of the ball, as well as having performed very well last season, of course. So when we look at them, one of the things about the Badgers is on the schedule, they're missing Ohio State. That really helps. They won't run into the Buckeyes potentially until that Big Ten championship game. Whereas, some of the teams below them do have Ohio State sitting on the schedule. But really, I mean, the big thing is that the defense was really terrific under Leonard last season. If the defense can again sort of hit where they're projecting, I think this team really has a shot to be special this year. With Wisconsin, though, I mean, our first question, with the Cone, injuries, do you really need A+, QB play? You can really argue that Cone hasn't delivered that. And I don't think a lot of people are going to argue that he has. I don't think you necessarily do. And certainly, Illinois shouldn't be too much of a test right off the bat this coming Friday night for them. I think the Badgers offense, as dominant as they're a run first offense, as everyone knows. I don't think that they're going to suffer too much, with, replacing a running back. I think that they are going to be fine. I think the defense does hit expectations coming into this year. They were very good last year. They weren't an excellent defense. And I think we saw that a little bit as the year went on, particularly in that Ohio State game. They really ran into some trouble. So, when they played the Buckeyes, I think Wisconsin is able to, put it together, take a little bit of a step forward, I think, on defense this season. If you're a Wisconsin fan, and I really think this is true. I think Wisconsin's ceiling is potentially the playoff. Like, I don't think that Wisconsin has the kind of Wisconsin doesn't have a lot of high ceiling players. And that means that I think that when you talk about the Badgers, you're not talking about them potentially having the same kind of stratospheric, ceiling that Ohio State might have. That said, Wisconsin's absolutely potentially a playoff team. They're going to be in the range where they might, if they run into the Buckeyes in the Big Ten championship, they might only be a touchdown underdog. If the Buckeyes have a bad night, Wisconsin can win that. They're going to be in the playoffs. So, you certainly should keep an eye on this Wisconsin team, in particular in a year where, if they really get rolling, run through their schedule, with the, the Big 12, you already have the advantage of talking about this with the Big 12 already having knocked, in a lot of ways, perhaps knocked themselves out of the playoff conversation. There's really an opportunity. Depending on, I don't know that the Pac-12 is going to have nearly as much of a window here, but for a team, the runner-up from either the SEC or the Big Ten to potentially, get into the playoff as that fourth team, depending on how they play and how the conference championship team, games go. So I think this is a potentially banner year for the Badgers. It's also something I think to keep an eye on as as you look at for next year, how many of these guys may return, with not losing in a year of eligibility. The Badgers might end up stacked 2 years in a row. So, this was a year. When we were doing the previews, I was really disappointed, particularly for Wisconsin and their fans when the Big Ten had canceled the fall season. I'm excited for them that they get to have this opportunity, because programs like Wisconsin are not the full on just run out replacements. They do build up to their very big years. This projected to be a really big year for them. I'm excited that they get to chase it. So next we have the Golden Gophers. This one, I will step out and say it. This is an interesting team with some real big potential downside. So Wisconsin, Minnesota, we project them, a little bit below Wisconsin. They're an unbalanced team. They're an offense first squad. And they were last year. We project this offense at number 4 overall, the defense at 64. Special teams pretty good. When you look at what we have returning for them, they bring a lot back on the offense, including getting back, the wide receiver that had declared for the draft. They don't bring as much back on the defensive side of the ball, and they don't have a great track record on defense like they had on offense. They graded out at 33 on defense last season, so they weren't exceptional on the defensive side of the ball last year. They definitely, with everything that they're losing, they're at 125 in returning production on defense. They have only 33% of their production coming back. But, the main thing is, and really the engine for this team was that offense, and they lost their offensive coordinator, Kurt Shiraka. He's off to Penn State. They made a really, really inexplicable hire in Mike Sanford Jr. If we were talking about Sanford, this hire for Sanford in, coming off of, when he was at Notre Dame, when he then went and got the Western Kentucky head coaching job, it's unlikely that Minnesota is going out and hiring Notre Dame's offensive coordinator away, but you could see it maybe a little more, or even hiring him, after the Western Kentucky. Frankly, I don't think Sanford wasn't great at Notre Dame. He was a decent, right? For their talent level that they had, he was decent. He didn't roll out any kind of great offenses. At Western Kentucky, he never got their offenses going. He was the offensive coordinator at Utah State last year, and it was a disaster. It was an absolute disaster schematically, play calling, development, everything about that offense massively regressed. So this is I'm sorry. I realize I'm probably just, we're asking, these are the questions in a lot of ways about some of these programs. Some of these programs have questions that don't have great answers coming into the year. So I'm sorry, Minnesota. There's an open question. Listen, Mike Sanford can absolutely turn this around, but you should just be I was surprised that they made this hire. I was not enthusiastic about it. It could absolutely work out. If it doesn't work out, you should let him go after this year and not hang on. But my expectation is they're going to continue running the same scheme. Sanford's not going to bring in his own scheme, but play calling is an actual skill. So I am interested to see if that works out and if they're able to meet this projection, because with everything that they have coming back, and how good they were last year on offense, you really expect, we expect them to be very, very good. And that's really what, floats this team, up the rankings. Oh man. Teams, unbalanced teams, it is a little tenuous. That team that is, that unit that carries the team, has to continue to produce at a very high level year in, year out, or, things can go off the rails. So that's it. So the defense here, they've got to really beat this projection here at number 64. They project to be a very bad Power 5 defense. They're not bringing a lot of experience back. We'll see. And the downside potentially for Minnesota, though, if the engine breaks here, is potentially finishing in the, very much in the middle of the pack here, and at only, 3 or 4 wins on the season on that 8-game schedule. So just, if you're a Minnesota fan, the thing to absolutely keep an eye on early on is, you got to see the offense performing at a really, really high level. So I realize that it may seem a little doom and gloom, but I don't know. I mean, you guys, I mean, that's the hire that, PJ Fleck went out and made. I mean, he went and hired a guy that tanked an offense, the year before. So I have questions. Now we get to Minnesota. I mean, at least I'll say this. I mean, at least Stanford has a track record of it at some point, at least producing a pretty decent Power 5 offense. Man, Iowa, we project them at 21. They're, this is the opposite effect. I mean, they have been so good and so consistent on defense. There, at Iowa. I think that they do just a phenomenal job on the defensive side of the ball. Whoops, I misspelled that. I was looking it up because I always forget the guy's name. He's like the most unassuming coordinator in all of college football, and really should be better known by everyone. Oh, I know why it's not working, because of course the internet just dropped again. Of course, hold on one second. It's Phil Parker. So Phil Parker is the DC at Iowa. He does a phenomenal job. I mean, we project this defense to be excellent again. Even though I think when we look at it, they only have 56% of their production coming back. Iowa has just done such a good job with Parker that we really like them, coming back into this year. I really like the Hawkeyes defense. I think they're going to be fine. The flip side of this, is like, I mean, and the really important question here is, is this offense? I mean, Ferentz's kid, Brian Ferentz, he's not a good offensive coordinator. He's not cut out to be an offensive coordinator at this level. He's in above his head. And I don't know that anybody can really call Kirk Ferentz on it, but man, I mean, he shouldn't have this job, and he's holding back the team in a big way. So we only project them at 45. This is around where they always finish, which is a pretty mediocre Power 5 offense. The special teams were great last season. I mean, one other thing to keep an eye on, and of course, Brian Ferentz is involved in this too. Of course, I mean, it's not only that he doesn't produce on the field, he of course gets entangled off the field as well. Ferentz, senior, and the Iowa administration and the school are being sued for $20 million by some former players. There are a lot of off the field issues. I mean, you could argue, I think Ferentz, in a lot of ways got off pretty light from Iowa for everything that was asserted and was found to be true really found to be true in the in the actual investigation. And Iowa, I feel like gave him pretty much a slap on the wrist. The off the field issues, they could matter this year. I mean, I think as long as Parker has that defense going, they're going to be fine. They're not going to fall off too much. But I mean, this is a team that, really, if we talk about like a one side, an unbalanced team, where the one unit has to keep producing. I mean, Phil, having this, defense with Phil Parker puts you in a decent spot. And I really think they have an opportunity to catch Minnesota for second in the Big Ten West, because I really do, Minnesota, that schedule, that offense does concern me a little bit for what they have. So, Iowa, they have a real shot to come in and catch them and finish second, I think. Nebraska, whoo, buddy. So Nebraska, we have them. So if you actually went through and ranked on like the expected conference wins, Nebraska actually has fewer expected conference wins than two of the teams below them in our rankings, because Nebraska has Penn State and Ohio State in the crossover. So they got the two toughest teams in the Big Ten East in the crossover games. That is hard. But I really think the question here is, Scott Frost was hired for his, a lot of what he was able to put together, with the offensive pyrotechnics, both at Oregon and then at Central Florida. The offense here for Nebraska really is, we're talking about a middle of the road Power 5 offense here. They need to be getting into the top 20 consistently. It's going to be Frost's third year. Like, he's got to deliver at this point. So they have if they can't be sitting here at this projection. They have a ton of production returning on the offensive side of the ball. 92% of the production. They absolutely like, and yet we only have them, projected here at 27. They've just got to beat this year. They can't be sitting here at this. The defense could really use to improve too. The special teams are just awful. And that's really leaving money on the table. So, Frost, for the accountability for Frost, the offense coming into this year and the special teams both have to make significant improvements. But the tough thing is, with this schedule, what does success look like really for them? And how hot is Frost's seat maybe going to feel with this tough schedule? Hopefully he's got an opportunity on next year's schedule to have a little bit of an easier Big Ten slate, but there are 3 games on their schedule with Ohio State, Wisconsin, and then Penn State, where they really figure to be fairly significant underdogs and then could likely go 0-3 in those games. So just it could be a rough year in Lincoln in a lot of ways. If you're a Nebraska fan though, like just accept that I say this like just accept. Like I grew up in Wyoming. I understand how crazy Nebraska fans are about the Cornhuskers, but it may not be easy to accept, but accept the schedule this year and really look for improvement in the advanced stats, because if you see, this offense is ticking up in beta rank or, choose your own adventure, choose your own advanced stats that you like, but it's ticking up into the top, 20. Don't use counting stats or like total yards or any crap like that. But, if they're ticking up into the top 20, like maybe, if they're in the top 15, that's a pretty good improvement. Special teams, you really need to see a significant improvement. If Frost can't turn special teams around too, like he's going to be a dead duck. So I know, just I'm Mr. Enthusiasm here. Here's a legitimately fun one though. Northwestern, oddly enough. So for the Wildcats, this is a year like a lot of people are focusing in on. Northwestern is number 1 in overall returning production. They have 84% of their production coming back. I should say again, these are Bill Connolly's returning production numbers. And I don't have time to audit them or, like mess around with them with my day job. So we're just using the other ones. They've actually worked pretty well for the projections for the other teams in predicting spread so far. So I'm not sweating it at this point. But Northwestern has 88% of their production returning on the offensive side of the ball. The trouble for Northwestern was that the offense finished out at 113 last season, which is, just god awful as a Power 5 offense. But Fitzgerald finally made a move. He finally, and you see so many guys like Mark D'Antonio or Gary Patterson at TCU that can't, and they're guys that they can't figure out the other side of the ball for the life of them. And it is so often some like brilliant defensive mind who ends up being a head coach, and of course they get like the defense not like dialed in, and then they're just unable for some reason to make the right hire on offense. And I like, you just see it a little too often. Like the names that I listed off, but Fitzgerald was one of them. He was a stick in the mud offensively. The offense had been just horrendous for years, and he was unwilling to make a change. Made a change. Bajakian, we're gonna go with that. It's probably wrong. Put it in the comments if to feel free to correct me phonetically. Anyway, they hired the former offensive coordinator at Boston College, who frankly did a pretty good job, I think, with the talent they had. They also bring in Peyton Ramsey, who is a darn good quarterback from Indiana. Indiana had the luxury of having 2 very good quarterbacks with Penix and Ramsey. In comes Ramsey at Northwestern. You are talking about a bold new offensive scheme, maybe, I don't know, at least a new offensive scheme, and a pretty good signal caller coming in to execute it. That gives you a lot of optimism, because the defense has been, the defense wasn't great last season. They finished out in the middle of the road for a Power 5, which is kind of on the low side for how Northwestern usually does on that side of the ball. I think they have upside with everything that they have returning. They've been a pretty good Power 5 defense. I like Northwestern to have a little bit of upside. The schedule's a little easier for them than it is for Nebraska. If the special teams can make some improvement, Northwestern's a team, they're the opposite. If you were going to say like going from the opposite situation of in a lot of ways, like either in Iowa or in Minnesota. Like they do have a unit that has been fairly steady on their defense. And instead of sitting on the very bad coordinator, or in the case of Minnesota, where you're just like, you're hoping to maintain your really amazing performance from that one coordinator, they're moving on from the extremely bad job that their offensive coordinator was doing. And now, they have an opportunity to, I think, really make a move. I mean, and catch up. I mean, it's hard to understate how big of an improvement this team could make in the rankings if they wildly overshoot this 90 projection for them. I mean, and that's like a new OC and a new QB can actually get you there. Like, scheme really matters in football. Yes, players matter too, but scheme really matters, and scheme and play calling. So I think they could get there if they get into the 50s, that kind of range overall here. I think they have a real opportunity to overshoot this the offense. If the offense can get into the 50s, I think they have an opportunity to get into like the 20s, for them. So keep an eye on this. Like, keep an eye on the Northwestern offense. Like, they could be really, really interesting this year. And it'll tell you almost everything you need to know about where they're going to finish, where the offense sort of shakes out. So then we have Purdue. Purdue got the wonderful end of the scheduling stick, if you will. Like, I think they got Indiana and Maryland in their crossovers, so they have a shot. Purdue. So the question, I think, is, Nick Holt actually did a really good job in the first year with the defense there, and then it just descended and fell off completely. He's out. In comes Bob Diaco. Can he fix the defense? I mean, I think somewhat. I mean, my expectation for this defense is a good year for them, to beat the projection, is probably getting into like the high 30s, low 40s. And I think if Diaco can get them there, that's a pretty good year. They do return some production. They return 73% of their production on that side of the ball. They return 76% of their production on the offensive side of the ball, including getting Rondale Moore back. The offense, if the offense could really get it going, that's what Brom was. It was interesting because Brom's first year, I mean, he was brought in more as an offensive minded coach. His first year, their offense wasn't particularly good. Last year, their offense, lately their offense has really started to carry more of the load while the defense has fallen off. If Diaco can get this defense into a better place, I mean, Purdue has all the upside in the world, particularly with the schedule. They could get to 5 wins, 6 wins. They could finish second in the Big Ten West. I mean, it really just for Purdue, for say Iowa, it's keep an eye on where, their offense, can they potentially be any better than their regular bad. For Purdue, it is, they've got a new coordinator in here for their unit that had been underperforming. If they can make some progress forward, they really have an opportunity to catch either Minnesota or Iowa there in the standings, because they got a gift on the schedule. So keep an eye on the Boilermakers, and in particular, just see where the defense is shaken out. If the defense starts to look good early, then they might have some real upside versus the win total. Illinois. So I got to say, Illinois was a little lucky last year, and then but this is the year in theory that they were sort of building to. They got a lot coming back this year, but they weren't great in advanced stats last year. They got some lucky wins. They again have a pretty favorable schedule, but with where they're at, that pretty favorable schedule doesn't help them out a ton. When we look at them here, we've got, they do have a lot. I mean, they're at number 15 overall in returning production. They have 78% overall coming back, 86% on the offense, 71 on the defense. But the offense, I mean, really in particular, they were at 85 overall in beta rank last season. That's one of the things that I really have sort of a question about coming into this. I mean, Rod Smith is the former OC with Rich Rod. He was at Arizona for a long time. I mean, he was really with Rich Rodriguez for a long time, which also meant that Rodriguez, for the most part, was actually calling the plays. But Smith, I mean, they haven't really been able to get it going on the offensive side of the ball here. He's really got to get it going this year for them. There are times, I mean, I say this, like, I think schematically that Rodriguez offense for the most part, worked at Arizona scheme-wise, but, I mean, they were abysmal at, player development and recruiting. And, I don't know that Lovie Smith has really crushed it in that area. And that, again, might be a little bit of the problem for the Illini here. So they might need somebody to really break. I mean, in the end, the only thing that was saving that Rich Rod offense at Arizona was the fact that Khalil Tate was just electric with the ball in his hands, and he was a perfect fit, for Rich Rod's scheme, and could cover up that, eventually that they just had a roster that wasn't at a Power 5 level at all. I think, here, I do worry about it a little bit, whether they can really turn a corner, but if Smith's going to do it, it's got to be this year. He's been there. This will be his third year there. They've got a lot coming back. They should know what they're doing in the system. Like this has got to be the year for them. And can they catch anyone? That I'm a little less sure of. I mean, they're going to need some. I mean, Illinois is going to have to beat their projection and likely have some luck in order to catch anybody. But I mean, there's no. They could go to a bowl, and frankly, I mean, if you're Illinois, you might have an opportunity to have a ton of production. I mean, everybody can have a ton of production coming back again. So there's an opportunity here if you really are developing players on like a long-term plan. In Illinois, this should have been the year for them to cash in. They did cash in. You could argue they cashed in a little bit last year with some luck and going to a bowl. But if you're going to do it, this might be the extra year to do it, where you could have like 60 or seniors, redshirt seniors coming in. Like Illinois, it feels tough. I mean, it feels tough. Like if they're going to have to get some luck for the second year in a row to make it to, I think, where they want to get to, and to not have, I mean, without the non-conference in for a lot of these Power 5 teams, like the records at the end of the year could look a little bit ugly. So let's, whoops. How did that happen? There was like an interstitial to a page there. Like almost flipping over to something else. So, let's go ahead and close it out. That's our questions about the Big Ten West. I'm really excited for the Big Ten to be coming back. You can find all the advanced stats that you just saw at sharpcollegefootball.com, and a whole lot more of advanced stats as well. I'm Rob Bowron. I'm the econometrician behind Beta Rank. I also handle the tweets from at Sharp College Football. We have a Pac-12 podcast at 12 Pack Radio. You can find all the back episodes of that at sharpcollegefootball.com/12 Pack Radio. Tomorrow I will have up the games that we're going to be doing. I've been hesitating because then so many games ended up being canceled. Last week we had 6. I'll have the games up that we're going to be covering for the Saturday 6 on Saturday morning. Be sure to tune in for that. That's at 6:30 a.m. And then you can always catch the follow-up replay on Periscope or YouTube. But thank you so much for tuning in. We will see you again soon. Hit me up if you have any questions. If you're really ticked off about the questions that I had about your team, I don't know, feel free to, send me an angry tweet. But stay safe out there, and we will see you again soon.